Hi folks, it's Heather Agnew here, senior yoga teacher and educator. And in this video, we're continuing on a series of discussions on yoga, philosophy, and ethics. And today we're going to be talking about Satya, truthfulness, and how we might practice this ethic in our practice, in our teaching, and in our everyday life. And Satya, or truthfulness, is a practice of mindful connection and a communication, paying attention to how we're moving through the world, how we're speaking, how we're thinking, how we're acting, and the impact that we have on each other, on our communities, and on the global community and the planet. Before we dig into Satya, though, let's begin with just a short introduction to our yoga philosophies and ethical teachings, the Yamas and Niyamas, in case this is new for you or you want a refresher. So, what are the Yamas and Niyamas? In the 8 limbs of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, the first 2 limbs are the Yamas and Niyamas, and they focus on ethics that can guide us in our choices and behavior, both in relationship with others and in our relationship with ourselves. And the yamas and niyamas ask us to look inwards, to introspect, and to start making mindful choices about our actions and our impact. And the first limb, the yamas, focuses on our social conduct, how we impact others through our words, our actions, even our thoughts. And taking a wider lens, perhaps how we can make the world a better place by how we engage in or endorse or oppose broader actions within our communities or globally. So, while much of our modern yoga practice tends to focus on our personal practice and our inner journey, it's good to remember that this first limb of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, these yamas, are there to remind us that no matter how far we travel in that inner journey, we have to remain grounded in awareness of our impact on others. So that's going to help us as we talk about the second of these yamas today, Satya, or truthfulness, and how we might practice this in daily life. So, what do the Yoga Sutras say? I've got 2 translations to share with you. When we are firmly established in truthfulness, action accomplishes its desired end. Another translation says, when one is established in truthfulness, actions and their fruit will correspond with one's word. So, what does this mean for us? And what does it mean for our modern daily life? Well, it could mean speaking with truthfulness and honesty and authenticity. It could mean acting with integrity. It could mean being true to your word, keeping your commitments, keeping your promises, living in alignment with your highest values. It could mean refraining from deception or distortions of reality or falsehoods. And it could mean being true and honest with yourself and living your authentic truth. So those are some quick examples, but there are so many practical ways that we could practice Satya in our daily life. For this discussion series, I've created some categories, because I like categories, to help us kind of narrow our view on a few areas of life and how we might practically put Satya into action. So if you're a note-taking type of person, you might like to pull out a notebook or fire up your laptop and create a file where you can take some of the suggestions or maybe let your imagination be sparked and think of 2 or 3 things you might do for each of these categories that suit you and suit your lifestyle. And you might not focus on them all at once, but creating kind of a plan for how you might take Satya out into your life in 6 areas. So personal relationships is the first area. Our yoga practice, and if you're a teacher, our yoga teaching, our workplace, our lifestyle, our community, and our relationship to the earth or to the environment. So those are our categories. We'll go through them slowly and I'll give you some suggestions. And again, hopefully your imagination will be sparked. You'll think of some things that you're already doing and maybe some things that you want to do, because it is good to remember that you are already engaged in lots of practice of Satya in your life. Even in your yoga practice, for example, we're always being encouraged to be true to how our bodies are showing up each day and letting that guide our practice. And that's Satya. Um, and we're all aware of the idea of being true to ourselves and living authentically. And these are really important. But again, let's also focus on this ethic in how we impact others, which is the primary focus of Satya. So for today, take some time to notice a few things in our categories that you're already doing, but perhaps take notice of a few new things that you might like to bring to your practice and to your lifestyle. So, what does truthfulness mean in daily life? In our personal relationships. So, this might include things like being honest with our partners, with our friends, with our kids, with our families about our lives and about our thoughts, and through our actions, the actions that we take. Speaking honestly with care. So expressing your feelings openly, but with compassion. So, like saying, I felt hurt when that happened, rather than staying silent or lashing out. Can include setting boundaries. So instead of agreeing to something you don't want to do, you might say, I need time for myself tonight. Being authentic. So showing up as yourself rather than performing a version of yourself to be liked or to be accepted. Being kind with your honesty. So the compassion of our first yama, ahimsa or non-harming, keeps truthfulness from being used as a weapon. People who say, oh, I'm just brutally honest, often tend to err on the brutal side. And honesty should always have non-harming at its foundation. Satya can also look like respecting other people's truth. And we'll talk about that more in a minute. That's kind of a bigger topic. And it certainly includes not sharing gossip or speaking about things that you don't know to be true. So, those are some ways that you might practice Satya in your personal relationships. Maybe take a moment to jot some of those down if they strike you, or jot down some of the ways you are already or you want to practice Satya in your personal relationships. Moving on, let's talk about our yoga practice or our yoga teaching and how we might practice Satya, truthfulness, in this area of our life. And it might include things like being true to how your body mind is showing up, both as a student and as a teacher. Uh, Teaching what you know, staying within your scope of knowledge and experience, and not making claims like, oh, this pose cures anxiety without clarity and without evidence. Being honest about your limits. So if you're tired, if you're distracted, if you're uncertain as a student or as a teacher, acknowledge that and make adjustments accordingly. Encouraging inquiry. As a teacher, you might invite students to listen to their own bodies rather than pushing into a version of a pose that they think is correct. It's useful in our practice of Satya to understand that other people's bodies and minds may have a different truth to yours in their experience of yoga. And of course, as a yoga teacher and business owner, being truthful in your communications with other businesses, with the government, with your taxes, etc. So, being honest in all of your business interactions. So those are some ways that you might practice Satya in your yoga practice and your yoga teaching. You might jot some of those down if they strike you, or just make some notes on what are some ways that you already are or you wish to begin practicing Satya in yoga. Moving on, let's talk about Satya in the workplace. And I've mentioned this before. I've not really had a lot of experience working in traditional workplaces. So you might have some great ideas on this that I'm not at all aware of. So this is a place where you might really be inspired to think up some ideas on your own. But some of the things that I think are important in the general workplace are obviously being honest in your dealings with coworkers, with employers, with customers or consumers. Giving constructive feedback. So speaking up about issues or concerns with honesty and respect instead of staying silent and simmering or, talking behind people's backs. Acknowledging mistakes. If you make an error, admit it, take responsibility rather than covering it up or, hoping it goes away. And being honest about your capacity. So finding ways to communicate things like, I can't take that on right now, when you're at capacity rather than overcommitting and potentially burning out. So those are some ways that you might practice Satya in your workplace. But again, you work in your workplace, you know what it's like. You might have much better ideas about how you could increase your practice of Satya or truthfulness in a way that fits with your workplace environment. So you might like to jot those down. Next, we're going to talk about lifestyle and how we might practice truthfulness in our own lifestyle. And that's going to include things like being true to your own needs in terms of sleep and nutrition and movement and personal time and rest time and play time. It's going to include things like aligning your choices with your values. So, for example, if you value rest, truthfulness means not glorifying being busy all the time and chasing that sort of striving lifestyle. Being clear about what matters to you. So choose consciously how you spend your time, your energy, your resources in ways that reflect what you genuinely care about. And finally, letting go of pretending. Release the pressure to appear perfect or to have everything together. No one does, and it's not authentic, and it's probably not really that healthy for your lifestyle. So those are some ideas. Maybe there's something you've already been thinking about in your lifestyle that you'd like to be a little more truthful about, or live more connected with your authenticity. So you might like to jot that down. For now, we'll talk about Satya in community. So in our community engagement, what are some ways we can practice more truthfulness? Well, number one, speaking up for justice, using your voice when you see dishonesty or unfairness, even if it's uncomfortable. Naming harms. So acknowledging harm, acknowledging exclusion in community spaces. So that might be a lack of accessibility or a lack of diversity, instead of ignoring it or avoiding it, because your voice matters. And sharing honestly. So where and when appropriate, share your real story with your community, not just your highlight reel. It helps to build connection and trust, and it literally helps build community. So those are some ideas on how you might practice Satya in your community. Maybe there's something helpful for you. Maybe you've got other ideas sparking on how you might practice truthfulness in your community that you can write down in your notebook. We'll move on to our final category, and that is truthfulness in our relationship with the earth or the environment. And my number one thought on this is facing the truth of our climate crisis, staying informed, avoiding denial or disconnection, even when the truth is uncomfortable, making conscious choices. So choosing to be truthful about your needs and reduce things like consumption, improve recycling, and supporting sustainable practices as expressions of living truthfully with the earth. And finally, educating others with care. So sharing factual, grounded information about environmental issues whilst avoiding alarmism or shaming, which are generally not useful. So those are some ways that you might practice Satya in your relationship to the earth and to the environment. I've got so much information that I've shared today, and you've probably got lots of ideas roaming around your brain. So now's a really good time to think about what are 3 ways that you might practice Satya. Based on all we've talked about so far, do you have a few ideas that you feel really strongly about that you'd like to practice Satya? You might like to pause this video for a moment and just jot those ideas down while they're fresh in your mind. To begin practicing more Satya in your life, in your yoga practice, and in your yoga teaching. For now, I thought I'd answer a few frequently asked questions that I receive regularly about Satya that I hope you find useful. The most common is, are there times when it might be okay to tell a lie? And yes, absolutely. If your safety or someone else's safety is ensured by telling a lie, or if the personal boundaries or social boundaries you've established have not worked or are not being respected, or just if a lie is the least harmful way to communicate with someone, then yes, a lie might be better than telling the absolute truth. I get this question a lot, and like, when is it okay to lie? And I think about this. There's a moral thought experiment that's sometimes called the murderer at the door, or Kant's axe murderer. And here's how it goes. A person's fleeing from harm and seeks shelter in your home, and you hide them. And minutes later, someone bangs on your door and, are they here? It's the person that's been chasing this person you're hiding. Are they here? They're not really asking, are they here? They're really asking, can I come in and hurt them? That's their real question. And so you can say no, because while on the surface it might look like a lie, in truth, you're answering the real question. No, you may not harm them. So sometimes truth is not just about facts, it's about protecting what's right. I hope that's useful. Another question I frequently get is, what about people lying to me? And I often hear people talk about Satya relative to what others are doing to them, how other people are lying or other people are behaving poorly. And I want to be clear that in terms of the Yamas, they're not so much about other people subscribing to your ethics, rather helping to guide you in mindful behavior towards others. That doesn't mean accepting people's bad behavior, but understanding that you aren't in control of it. Having said that, if someone is regularly dishonest with you, the truth of your relationship may have to be reassessed. So we can't control someone else's behavior, but we can control whether or not we want to be in relationship with them. I hope that helps. Another question I get regularly is, how is there a difference between your truth and someone else's truth? And the truth is not a fixed or singular thing. People have different versions of the truth because of perspective, because of culture, because of experience, because of their emotional reality. So let me explain. When it comes to things like memory and perception, two people can experience the same event. So, like a conversation or a disagreement, but remember it very differently. So, like one person recalls feeling dismissed or unheard, while the other person remembers being calm and respectful. Both are speaking their truth based on their perception, shaped by, things like their personal history and their emotions. So those are two different versions of truth. We also have cultural truths. Cultural values shape what is seen as true or right. So in some cultures, it's considered true that the elders know best, while in other cultures, truth is found through direct experience and independence. Neither is a lie. They're culturally embedded truths. But we also have emotional truth. So emotions can carry their own form of truth, even if it's not factually accurate. So, if you don't give a kid a cookie, they say, "You don't love me." And the emotional truth is real to them. Their hurt is real and valid, although the factual reality is quite different, right? So that's emotional truth. We also have spiritual or philosophical truth. So different belief systems lead to different truths about existence or purpose or morality. So one person might believe that karma determines outcomes, another believes in chance, another believes in divine will. Each of those people holds a truth that makes sense within their worldview. And finally, I want to talk about the yoga teacher's lens when it comes to this different perspectives of truth, because in yoga teaching you might have one student who says this pose hurts me, while another person says this pose really helps me, and both are true. And as a yoga teacher, our ethics guide us to honor those differing experiences by providing options, by holding space for safety and exploration, and by not insisting that there is a truth to any particular pose. Um, and, especially if the pose in question is one that you personally love, know that not everyone has the same experience as you. So those are some thoughts on how there can be a difference between one person's truth and someone else's truth that I hope you find helpful. Finally, I want to mention that personal truth is not the same as bias or distortion or alternative facts. Personal truth refers to a lived experience and perspective, but that's different from holding a belief that contradicts clear evidence or causes harm. So, for example, there's a strong scientific consensus that we are in a climate crisis. If someone denies that based on the fact that it's cold outside today, or they heard something on a podcast, or they find it inconvenient to their other beliefs, that's not a personal truth. It's a distortion that ignores the broader body of evidence. So bias in this case isn't just a differing perspective. It's a misunderstanding or a rejection of well-supported facts. So when we're talking about how one person's truth can differ from another person's truth, that is not the same as having a bias or having alternative facts. Well, I hope you find that helpful. Um, this has been so much, so we're going to close for today. I hope that some of the ideas we've shared here today have given you some thoughts or sparked your imagination on how you might be practicing truthfulness in your own life. And so I jot down some notes. If you're open to it, you can share some of your ideas on our socials. It's great to keep the conversation going. And if you'd like to read more or watch more on this series on yoga, philosophy, and ethics, in how we connect and communicate with each other, you can stay tuned to the blog at yogatrinity.com or tune into our channel on YouTube, Yoga Trinity Training, and I look forward to continuing the conversation with you. Thank you so much.